welcome. I'm Tafara Gadamu. 40 years ago last week, the paleontologist Donald Johanson had his book, Lucy, The Beginnings of Humankind, published. Well, that book not only provided the intricacies of the search for human origins, but it also put Ethiopia back on the map right before its image was tarnished again following the 1984-85 famine 3 years later. Well, back to the book now. A very warm welcome to the program again.
Well, thank you, Tafera. It's always a joy to be on a guest on your program, Meet ETV, and to be interviewed by you.
Thank you. So this book, this is the original one. This is the original one.
Well, that's a paperback.
Yes, it's a paperback, yeah. So this was published 40 years ago, last week.
Yep, 40 years ago.
40 years ago last week.
It's amazing how time passes.
But 40 years is nothing compared to Lucy's existence, when was it 3.2 million years ago.
Yes, she's 3.2 million years, and when she reappeared after 3.2 million years, she made quite an impact on the study of paleoanthropology, human origins. And I'm very proud to say that it was 51 years ago, 51, so that's 3/4 of my life, spent working in and out of Ethiopia. I was a young scholar when I first went to Ethiopia in 1970. And was working in the Omo region. And so Ethiopia has had a very long history of offering scholars the opportunity to work in the Great Rift Valley and other places to understand the origins of humankind. And it stretches back all the way to the 1930s, but my first visit was 1970, in June 1970.
1970, but it was 4 years before you discovered Lucy in the Badlands of the Hadar.
Yes, I was invited by a very generous man who has recently passed away, Maurice Taïeb, a French geologist who was working with the Ministry of Culture and Ministry of Geology. And he encountered areas where there were lots of fossils on the surface of the ground. And in 1974, during one of our initial expeditions, we found the skeleton known as Lucy, more popularly around the world as Lucy, and also known as Dinkinesh or Halomali in the Afar language. And what is remarkable is that in 1973, the year before, I made the first discovery of a human fossil in the entire Afar region, which was a fossil knee that showed us that humans had walked that landscape at least 3 million years ago. We know that knee now is about 3.3, 3.4 million years. Right. We didn't know who it belonged to. We didn't know what kind of creature it was. And then we had the great fortune when I went out in 1974 in November on a survey, and I spotted fragments of the skeleton that has become known as Lucy. She was named by someone on the expedition after a Beatles song. But we also felt that she needed her own Ethiopia name. So in Ethiopia, she's known as Dinkinesh. Right. And what was remarkable about this discovery was that we saw the emergence of an individual, of a person. And I wasn't prepared for that reaction. The reaction I had when I announced her through the Ministry of Culture to the world was that there was a great desire on the part of people to know more about how she was discovered, who she was, how old she was when she died, what kind of world she lived in, and so on. And this came obviously from the academic scientific community, but it came from those individuals who wake up and read their morning newspaper.
That's
And
right.
they said, my gosh, this is very exciting. What does it mean for us? So I was really unprepared as a young academic. I had just got my PhD, to write about it in a more which easy way
Popular.
to popularize it. So I had the great opportunity of collaborating with Maitland
Maitland
Eady.
Eddy. Yes.
Maitland Eady, who is now passed on, but he was an excellent writer and had a deep interest in science. And we were fortunate in writing this book, which was published in 1981. And the book itself had a considerable impact on the field of human origins. I think probably the most positive impact it had was that it excited and interested now some 2 generations, almost 3 generations of people who study human origins. I teach at Arizona State University at the Institute of Human Origins, and every single student we have who comes in as a graduate student says, would you sign my copy of Lucy? I read this book and I decided that's what I want to do. The other thing that it did was it interested a number of Ethiopian scholars to proceed and to continue to study paleoanthropology. People like Johannes Haile Selassie, who interestingly now is director of the Institute of Human Origins.
The institute that you founded way back in the 1980s, right?
Yes, way back in 1982. And also a scholar, Zaresanai Alamseget, who is at the University of Chicago as a professor. And these 2 young scholars, both born in Ethiopia, have made major discoveries built upon the earlier discoveries. And their discoveries and their insights are really expanding our view of how these early tongue twister Australopithecus creatures fit in to the great diversity of human evolution. And the record for the oldest fossils from Ethiopia stretch back almost to 5 million years. They're very fragmentary, but Ethiopia is unique in all of the world in the sense that we have a long record. It's spotty in places, but reaches back as much as 5 million years ago. And now is right up to the emergence of you and me and all of your listeners, of Homo sapiens. Discoveries from the Kibish Formation in the Omo region and other discoveries of early Homo sapiens make the fossil record, the definitive record of who our ancestors were, what they looked like, what the shape of the family tree was, what kind of world they lived in, is unique to Ethiopia.
Right. So, I mean, you mentioned the discoveries made by Ethiopians and also Americans and so on over the last 40, 50 years, and some older, much older than Lucy, up until 5 million years ago. You know what I'm saying? Now, but regardless of all that, Lucy stands to be that thing. I mean, Lucy is a milestone. Is always in there in people. It sort of dwarfs them all. Do you agree?
Well, Lucy has become iconic. She's the individual that most people think of when they think about human evolution.
So my question is, you're right, but my question is it because of you popularizing that part, that Lucy, making it really public, that kind of
yes, I think so. The fact that I have spent a great deal of my career translating and the ideas from the academic side to the more public people who they don't want to read the technical journals, but they want to know more about how we became human. And when we pick up a newspaper, I think whether it's here or Ethiopia or anywhere on the planet, and a new discovery is made in Ethiopia, they will say, oh, a fossil skull 2 million years older than Lucy was found in Ethiopia, or a fossil found in the Afar region near where the Lucy skeleton was found in 1974. So she's become the touchstone for people who are interested. I recently had dinner with somebody here in the US, and when he learned who I was and he learned about Lucy, we spent the whole rest of the evening talking about it, because there is a deep interest in this, I think. And and of course, what our work has shown, which is, I think, overall, the most important thing that we've learned, and the message that I have tried to spread, is that everybody on the planet, regardless of, you know, what color skin they have, what shape eyes they have, what culture they live in, that these roots all lead back to Africa. And it means that everyone on the planet carries genes that originally evolved in Africa. So in a way, after 3.2 million years, in sort of suspended animation, nobody knew who Lucy was. And here she was, trapped in a geological layer for 3.2 million years. When she emerged, she had a really significant message to bring to all of us. This commonality of humanity is very, very important. And, you know, what's so fascinating is it doesn't really matter whether you fully accept the idea of evolution or not. And more Americans finally we are in the majority now of people who accept the fact that humans changed over time, is the fact that we can identify with this commonality of humanity.
So you made it popular all over the world. It became what it later became, an icon, as you just said. But in Ethiopia, you know, people know about Lucy, but they were not able to read, in most cases, your book. I understand you have plans to have it translated into Amharic. Is that correct?
Well, there was a gentleman who was trying to do this, and I don't know if that translation is finished or not, but certainly this book should be and should have been translated into Amharic as a national language. But it's interesting that I've given a number of lectures in Ethiopia. They've shown my television series that I did many years ago.
In Search of Human Origins?
Yeah, In Search of Human Origins, a 3-part television series that I did with American public television, and then it was shown on Ethiopian TV. So there are more and more people are learning about it in the press because of your programs, but certainly it would be wonderful if there was an opportunity. Even though the book was written 40 years ago, it is an inspiring book about the search for human origins. And I've always felt that it should be translated into Amharic. So we really need to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, and after this, after your book, you also, authored several other books.
Largely, I did, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
I've worked in Tanzania, where we found a partial skeleton of an early human about 1.8 million years old. After the interruption of field research between sort of 1982 and 1990, we returned to the site of Hadar, where Lucy was found, and continued to work there, and now have complete skulls of her species, Australopithecus afarensis, named after the Afar people in the Afar region. So we have this is probably the single best known fossil species of early humans from anywhere in Africa. And all of these specimens, including, of course, Lucy, are stored and looked after and cared for and safely kept at the National Museum in Addis Ababa, so that scientists from all over the world can come and study those specimens. And the exhibit at the National Museum highlights Lucy and many of the other discoveries. So anybody who wants to, take an afternoon and go to the museum and see this will have a much better understanding of how Lucy fits in and why Ethiopia is so incredibly important for understanding human origins, the origins of all humankind.
So you told me people come and talk to you and then say, okay, I want you to autograph Lucy for me and so on and so forth. But are there people who read the book and decided they want to be paleontologists?
Oh, yes. Yes. It's very, there are so many stories about that, but all of our graduate students who come to the Institute at Arizona State University to study paleoanthropology come into my office and with their copy of Lucy and say, this is what inspired me, or you gave a lecture on my campus, or I saw your television. But most of them come in with the book and say, I read this book and decided I wanted to do this. And they want a signature. But it's also, it not only has inspired young scholars here in America, but as I said, it's inspired people in Ethiopia who read that book. And from many places in the world. One of the oddest was I was in Italy at an international conference, and a young scholar from the country of Georgia on the Caspian Sea, as you know, said that he had read a Russian translation of the book. Wow. While he was on a train. And he is now director of the National Museum in Tbilisi. And he has made wonderful discoveries of fossils in his own country. So one of the legacies that I cherish is that not only was this a great discovery for me and for my career and for the science, but it has become an attraction for people who are interested in the subject, who may not go into the field, but also has increased the numbers of scholars in the fields of paleoanthropology, which means that many people are looking at it with very different eyes. We have very different opinions sometimes about things, but from the scientific point of view, one of the most important aspects about Lucy's species afarensis is the very strong possibility, and most people think this is the case, that her species that lived between 3 and 4 million years ago was a species that gave rise to modern humans, Homo sapiens, and also to other forms of Lucy's type, Australopithecus, that died out. And that tells us that it wasn't just a straight line from an ape-like creature to a modern human, that there were many paths that died out, but this was at a pivotal point on the family tree that, under the influence of natural selection, climate change, and behavior and so on, evolved ultimately into ourselves.
Interesting. So I don't know whether you remember, but it was close to 28 or probably 30 years ago. That was I think 28 years ago that you autographed this book for me. It was October 6, 1993. Now, what is it?
Right.
So I read it then in full, and reading your book was like reading a novel. And
thank you.
From your own perspective, you put everything out there, warts and all.
Yeah.
In hindsight, the things that you would want to edit out if you were given the chance to write it again?
No, I don't think so. of course, I haven't, I've now done an audio version of the book, by the way, which is available on Amazon and elsewhere. No, I don't really, I don't think I would take anything out of the book. It is from the perspective of discovery, out of date, so that there are more recent books that deal with subsequent discoveries. My Lucy's Legacy book is partly that. Ian Tattersall has written a number of books. He was at the American Museum of Natural History. And there are other books that, certainly bring us up to date.
So you're working on another book now as we speak, is that correct?
Yes, when we get to be this advanced age, we begin to think about our life and our experiences. And since I've been a public figure for so long, I'm currently working on an autobiography that will talk about, how in the world did this young American get interested in the subject. It's a fairly, in the broad sweep of science, it's an esoteric study, but it does deal with us, so we're very, emotional about it. And my parents were Swedish immigrants who came to America in the 1920s, and my father was a barber. My mother was cleaned people's houses, and there were very few books in my house. So I had the great fortune of meeting a professor when I was when I was about 9 or 10 years old. And he inspired me to be an academic, and I was always interested in natural history. And I read a book called Man's Place in Nature by Thomas Henry Huxley, written way back in the 19th century. Yeah. And was so intrigued with the idea that we had a deep ancestry in time, and we shared that ancestry with the African apes. I'm talking about, what my school life was like when I was in elementary school and high school, and then university, and some of the travels I've done in life, and why I think understanding our past is so vital to understanding who we are in the world today. I will be going to a conference later this year in Europe, where I've been asked to kind of put humans in the broad time of our planet. And it took about 4.5 billion years before humans appeared on this planet. It was a long journey after the formation of the solar system. And I feel that when we as a species today are facing such critical challenges, here in California, we're running out of water. The forests are burning down. Water is becoming a valuable resource in many places around the planet. When you think about Lucy's time, who lived for at least her species for at least 1 million years, as modern humans like us, we've been around maybe for 200, 300,000 years, which is a third of the time, or a fifth of the time that Lucy's species existed. And we're worried, we're concerned. This is what I'm telling this group in Europe, that when we look at us, if longevity is a sign of success, we have a long way to go to be as successful as Lucy's species was.
Interesting.
And so it's very important for us to understand our place not only in the natural world, but also, I think, our place in time. And so there are implications of our discoveries that are implications for our future. And it is such a fascinating journey
Yeah.
to have come from a creature that had a brain about the size of a orange or
Yeah.
something like that, to having a brain that's 3 to 4 times that size.
Exactly.
And so we are the most intelligent, but yet in many ways
Right.
we're the most stubborn species. You know,
Exactly.
we sort of think we're very privileged,
Right.
but you know, as we look at the sort of what we've done to the natural world, we're not really as thoughtful and brilliant as we think we are, because
Yeah.
we are the ones who are causing all of this. Lucy lived certainly much more in harmony with the natural world in which she was born. We tend to live and do Zoom meetings like this.
Right.
Some people never even meet each other, mind touch one another.
Exactly.
And so I think that we have a lot to learn from our past that will help us understand ourselves and hopefully help us do the right things for the future of the species.
Right, great. So is this autobiography going to be the last one, or you're also planning to write
Oh, I don't know.
another book? I hear that there is going to be one last book that will be published posthumously.
Well, I don't know if I will write that book or not. You know, Mark Twain, who was one of the great American writers, waited 100 years, he said, till his book was published because he didn't want to offend anybody. And you know, the book I'm writing will certainly highlight some of the conflicts I've had in my life, some of the difficulties I've faced. But I'm certainly not interested in publishing a book that's going to be ad hominem attacks on individuals. I think that really isn't what we want to do. Maybe some of my more sensitive secrets will be published 100 years from now by a biographer or something.
Right. Well, good luck with that, and thank you very much, Professor Donald Johanson, for joining me on the show. Thank you very much indeed. It was really a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, Tefera. Stay well, stay safe, and I cannot wait to come back to Ethiopia.